You need to stop. This doesn't involve you.
I'm just helping. The yard was getting out of hand.
I didn't violate any rules. I was just trying to cut a lawn that had been left untouched since the man who owned it died. And I realized pretty quickly that the grass wasn't the problem. The memory was. The house belonged to their father. He had lived there for over 40 years, long enough for the porch boards to sag in familiar places and for the lawn to grow in a way only time can shape. It wasn't a neat lawn even when he was alive. It was uneven, stubborn, and full of patches that refused to grow the same way twice. But it was his, and he liked it that way. After he passed, the grass kept growing. Mark was the one who called me. He was the younger brother, the one who stayed nearby, the one who dealt with the house after the funeral ended and everyone else went back to their lives. He told me the city had already sent a notice. Tall grass, potential fine. He sounded tired when he explained it, like he'd already had this conversation too many times. My brother says we can't touch it, he said. Says Dad wouldn't want it changed. When I pulled up, the lawn was over 10 inches tall in most places, thick and matted, bending under its own weight. It didn't look peaceful, it looked abandoned. Neighbors slowed their cars as they passed, eyes lingering just long enough to make the judgment clear. Mark stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the yard like it was a problem he couldn't solve without permission he wasn't sure he needed. He always said he liked it natural, Mark said, that it didn't need to look like everyone else's, but he still cut it, just his way. Before I could unload the mower, a truck pulled up behind me. A man stepped out who looked like Mark, just older, sharper around the edges. This was David, the older brother. He didn't live there anymore, hadn't for years. "You're not cutting this," David said. Not loudly, not angrily, just certain. Mark sighed. "We talked about this. The city, I don't care about the city," David replied. Dad hated when people tried to tell him how his yard should look. This grass stays. "He's gone," Mark said quietly. "And I'm the one dealing with the notices. I'm the one who lives with the looks." David's jaw tightened. "So now we erase him to make things easier." That's when I understood what kind of story this was going to be. I stood there holding the mower handle while two brothers argued about a man who wasn't there to settle it. The lawn sat between them like evidence, like a witness that couldn't speak but somehow still took sides. Mark finally looked at me and nodded. "Go ahead." The mower roared to life and the sound felt louder than it should have. The blade tore into the tall grass, leaving a clean strip behind. The smell of fresh-cut grass filled the air, sharp and familiar, the kind that usually signals something getting fixed. David stepped forward. "Turn it off." Mark didn't raise his voice. "If you want to stop it, call the city and tell them you'll pay the fine." David pulled out his phone instead. By the time I finished the first pass, two city enforcement officers were standing at the edge of the lawn. David spoke to them, calmly, explaining that the yard was intentionally left as a tribute to their father's wishes and that unauthorized changes were being made to jointly inherited property. Mark tried to explain his side. The notice, the fines, the fact that this was still a residential property, not a memorial site. The officers listened, asked questions, and checked records. One of them finally said what no one wanted to hear. "Until the estate is settled, neither of you can make unilateral changes without consent from the other." Mark stared at him. "So what am I supposed to do when the fine comes?" "That's a civil matter," the officer replied. David folded his arms. Then the mowing stops. I shut off the mower. The lawn now looked worse than before, half wild and half trimmed, like someone had interrupted an argument mid-sentence. Mark rubbed his face with both hands. "This isn't about Dad," he said. "This is about you controlling something because you're not here anymore." David's voice softened just slightly. "It's about not pretending he never existed." Another complaint came in while we were still standing there. Someone nearby had reported a disturbance tied to an unresolved property dispute. This time, police arrived, not city enforcement. They asked questions again, shorter this time. Who authorized the work? Who objected? Who lived there? Mark answered honestly. David didn't lie. The officers made a decision that felt less like justice and more like efficiency. Mark was told he needed to leave the property temporarily until ownership and permissions were clarified. Just for the day, they said, just to prevent escalation. Mark laughed once, bitter and disbelieving. "So I get removed from my own childhood home because I tried to keep it from being a citation? One officer shrugged apologetically. "Sir, this isn't about right or wrong, it's about preventing further conflict." Mark looked at the lawn half-cut one last time. Dad wouldn't have wanted this either. No one responded. They walked him to the car without handcuffs, but the message was clear. David stayed behind, standing alone on the porch, the lawn preserved in its unfinished state, wild enough to honor memory, neglected enough to invite punishment. I loaded the mower back into my truck. The grass stood tall again where it hadn't been touched and uneven where it had. A compromise that satisfied no one. Some people will say tradition matters more than appearances. Others will say the living shouldn't suffer for the sake of memory. The law didn't choose a side, it just froze the argument in place. The lawn stayed exactly as it was, not because it was what their father wanted, but because two brothers couldn't agree on whether honoring him meant preserving the past or surviving the present. If you want me to go back and help sort this out and keep telling stories like this, subscribe to the channel and write subscribe in the comments so I know you're with me.